Hello there, and welcome to the seventh video in my Jedi 101 series, where I read from my book, Your First Step into a Larger World, an introduction to walking the Jedi Path. So let's just jump right into Chapter 6, Focus and Attitude. I do not see the Jedi Path as religion. Rather, I see it as an applied philosophy. While religion is concerned what a person believes, I see the Jedi Path as the cultivation of attitudes. And it is these attitudes that are expressed as actions. Our attitude will be colored by what we give our attention to. Or in the words of Qui-Gon Jinn in The Phantom Menace, your focus determines your reality. For many years, I did not buy into the view expressed by Qui-Gon Jinn. I thought it bordered on the mystical. I saw reality as something objective, and certainly perception could not change what was real. It was in that denial that I would discover the seed of truth in Qui-Gon Jinn's words. I realized that we interact with the universe through our senses, which despite common belief number much more than 5. But everything we sense is interpreted by our mind. Our bodies are not finely calibrated instruments, and our interpretation of the world around us is dependent on our perception of it. Our minds have an amazing ability I touched upon in the last chapter. Our minds are exceedingly malleable and are able to change. While external forces such as brain injury or surgery can change how a person thinks, we have the ability to shape not only what we think, but how we think it, and it is the power of thought that creates these changes. In the same vein, our perceptions can be influenced by many things, including how we feel, the attitudes we have, and what we pay attention to. That is, our focus. When events happen in our lives, our perception of these events is colored by what we pay attention to. If we focus on one aspect of a complicated issue, we give that aspect more importance than what we take into account when evaluating something. We may make the mistake of thinking the object of our focus is the only thing that matters or has influence. How many times have you had a bad day where everything seemed to go wrong, one bad thing after another? Where was your focus on this day? Were you giving attention to the things that were making you unhappy, so much so that you may have missed something that could have mitigated it? I have at times, and have seen others refuse to have a good time in an enjoyable environment by focusing on things elsewhere that were both upsetting and currently outside of their sphere of influence. However, a Jedi should not be a Pollyanna and dismiss bad things in favor of a rose-colored view. While there is value in focusing on the positive, we must not do so to a degree where we do not see very real problems and injustices. An extreme focus in either direction would be ultimately detrimental. To combat the tendency for extreme focus, we must also gain a good perspective. Sometimes being too close to something will cause us not to be able to see it in the context of what is happening around it. We must be able to step back and take in a wider view. Just as we cannot view a mosaic by concentrating on a few small stones, we must take in the whole work to see the images the artist created. When our focus is too narrow, we may miss something important in our... We must... Not gonna end it. In our focus, we must not choose to focus on what is good and what is bad, but rather what is important. The decision as to what is important will be an individual one, and what we see as important will depend greatly on the attitudes we hold. This brings us back to the malleability of the mind. While our attitudes color our interactions and our perceptions, what attitudes we express are our choice. Not only are attitudinal responses based on our own choices, we can choose to actively cultivate positive mental attitudes befitting a Jedi of quality. So now, we must ask ourselves, what are the attitudes of a Jedi of quality? For inspiration, we can look at the Jedi characters in Star Wars media, but inspiration from myth and fiction are not enough criteria to choose. We do not incorporate things into the Jedi Path simply because a fictional Jedi did a thing. We must evaluate what we bring into our path and the way we live as to whether or not there is benefit and utility. Even small benefits, such as, this makes me happy, can be acceptable in the Jedi Path if it still aligns with our core principles of what it means to be a Jedi of quality. Now, many of the Jedi characters, especially in the prequels, were flawed characters. For the stories would not be interesting if the characters were perfect, making no missteps or mistakes. Instead, we look at what are the qualities of a theoretical ideal Jedi. If we can create in our minds an ideal Jedi, what attitudes would he or she or they have? One of the first things that comes to my mind is patience. I often say that the first lesson we learn as Jedi, and the last one we truly master, is that of patience. Training sincerely in the Jedi Path is a years-long process, and there is not much about it that is quick. Patience will also serve us well in our day-to-day lives. Patience can take many forms. One of my favorite practices of patience is to quietly meditate or contemplate while waiting in a long line. There is an acceptance in this that I will have to wait and that there is nothing within my sphere of influence that can make my wait any less. So I spend the time inculcating positive mental traits, or perhaps thinking about something I will write later. The important part is to be there, be present, and accept something I cannot change, the wait, and use my time positively instead of focusing on the annoyance of long lines or the slow transactions before me. Other forms of patience can be remaining calm when in the presence of annoying individuals, or the ability to wait for things that we eagerly anticipate. Another attitude that I think is worth cultivating is that of humility with confidence. A surface reading of these two attitudes might lead one to think that humility and confidence are diametrically opposed, but taking a deeper, more nuanced view, we say that these two attitudes can work together. The key to humility with confidence is frank, honest self-examination. It is this quality of honesty that leads us away from false humility on one pole and cockiness on the other. Honesty allows us to know both our abilities and our limitations, and humility with confidence means not dissembling either. Humility with confidence allows us not only to express honestly our abilities, but it also allows us to demonstrate them. Confidence will allow us to approach a situation or task that we are ideally suited to address with no apologies, while being tempered with humility. We will not overextend or promise things beyond what we can manage. This brings me to mind a story I was told about a job interview. It was presented to me as a true story, but it may be legend. A moving company is interviewing candidates for the position in a room with a large antique safe. Many of the applicants were large, muscular men, and at the end of the interview, the boss would ask the applicant to move the safe from its corner to the other side of the room. Many of these strong men would struggle when strained to move the safe to no avail. Then in comes someone not as big, not as strong. At the end of the interview, the boss asked him to move the safe across the room. This time the applicant looked at the safe and simply said, "I can't move that." The story concludes with him being offered a job on the spot, but for our purposes, it is a great example of the Jedi attitude of humility with confidence. Mindfulness is a great attitude to inculcate. Entire books can be written on the topic, but to summarize here, mindfulness is the ability to be fully present and aware of where you are and what you are doing. It is the attitude of engaging your mind and acting with clear intention. When one is mindful, one is not only aware of one's own actions and internal landscape, but also of the effect of those actions on those in one's sphere of influence. I will close with one more positive mental attitude, that being a hope. Harvey Milk said, "You cannot live on hope alone, but without it, life is not worth living." Hope is one of those central tenets from the Star Wars films. The first film was later subtitled A New Hope, and the theme of hope is pervasive throughout the Star Wars films. It is even the last line of Rogue One. Hope is something that we can consciously cultivate, and in so doing create positive outcomes. The world is far from a perfect place. However, overall, things are better today than they were in the past, even in the recent past, and even the past you feel nostalgia for. Being hopeful is acting with confidence that this positive trend will continue, realizing this better future will take effort and work on our part and on the part of others. We will have to overcome the occasional setback and those resistant to change. The resistance to change, or the belief that things were better in the past, is an attachment to the way things are and often rooted in fear. When you find yourself not wanting things to change, it may do you well to ask what it is you are afraid of losing. Okay, so that's the end of chapter 6, Focus and Attitude. You know, of all the chapters in the book, I think this is the one that probably could have stood expanding more. You know, I'm very brief when I write, as you can see as you've gone through the series. My chapters aren't very long. The book is not very long. Look how thin this thing is. It's tiny. It's barely a book. It's a pamphlet. Anyways, yeah, I could have expanded. There's a lot of positive mental attitudes that help us along in being Jedi of quality. I think I did good highlights of some good ones. And again, there are whole books on mindfulness, so other people have done it better than I could. So I'm not gonna put out a book on Jedi mindfulness, but I do recommend practicing mindfulness. And the chapter on hope, or the section on hope, the paragraph, the section, whatever. Here in 2020, it may be hard to think that things are better now than they were in the past, but they were. And this is one of those periods where things are kind of going backwards a little bit, but the overall trajectory is positive. Things will change. Things always change. And really, especially now in time, when I'm recording this, we're in the election season in the United States of America. And there's a big conversation about whether to protect the status quo or to change. And, those that want to protect the status quo, you got to look. What are they afraid to lose? I mean, that's what there is to it. I don't mean to get overly political, especially specific to United States politics in my Jedi 101 video, but it's close to the surface. But, with both the political situation, the country and I live, and my own health, I think I needed this reminder, personally, to stay hopeful. It's so important. And hope doesn't get a lot of talking about in the Jedi community, which is a little odd. So, be the change you want, Christopher. Start talking about hope in the Jedi community. I guess I'm going to do it. And focus on, and because this was focus and attitude for myself, for my own assignment, my own training, I'm going to task myself with focusing on hope. So, thank you, everyone, for your views, for your comments, for your participation, and for your subscriptions. I thank you. I am humbly grateful that people are watching these videos and getting some value from it, getting some feedback. I thank you for that. And until the next video, be well, and may the Force be with you.